Hey, it's Zack Hughes, former Green Beret, and you've stumbled upon my Special Forces journey. I'm on episode 4 of 10 series where we're chronologically going through the Special Forces qualification course as I remember it. Now, we're on the 4th episode, so if you've somehow stumbled here and you're lost as can be, you need to go back and watch all 3. Also, simultaneously, we've got a Navy SEAL journey coming down. We're about to add a MARSOC journey, so subscribe to the channel and make sure and digest these as they come through. On this specific episode, I'm diving through day 0 of Special Forces selection and dealing with the Cadre and the layouts and frankly people quitting, and then going all the way through until we start the training and we actually get past that really just incredible first day that kind of sucks. So enjoy the podcast. Hope to see you soon.
And your first interaction with selection is guys start coming in from different courses, or excuse me, from different units. So you'll start seeing, so say you finish SOPC on Friday, selection starts on Sunday, which is typical. It'll typically start on a Sunday. These guys on Saturday will start flying in from Alaska, start driving in from Fort Bragg. They'll come in from Hawaii, from Fort Drum, from wherever, Germany, all over the United States, wherever they're stationed as an Army man, and coming into selection. So they'll start filtering in on Saturday. And they are so lost in the sauce because they haven't been there for 3 weeks. You are way ahead of them just in terms of everything. And they're really going to start asking you like all these questions, but they're going to be housed in a different room than you. But you're like, oh, those are the new guys. They're starting to filter in. They're starting to filter in. Some of them come in civilian clothes, which immediately gets corrected. Some of them come in dress uniforms like an idiot. Some of them come wearing all kinds of crazy stuff. Some guys you'll see show up with hair, and you had to be shaved head to show up, so they'll just immediately send him back. They're not going to shave his head. They're just going to tell him, no, you can't come. You're not selected. You didn't read the instructions that we gave you. So everybody finally gets there, and the first day starts, and it's really another layout where they tell you to open up your dead hooker bag, open up your rucksack, lay your ponchos out, dump all of the equipment that we told you could bring. And there's some that is like optional or recommended, and you can bring some of that stuff. But basically, you can't bring anything that's not on the list, period. That's all there is to it. So they'll go through, and there's a ton of cadre there now. It's not just a little. And it's way more intense. Hey, helmet, raise it up. Everybody raise up their helmet. One guy doesn't have it. He's done. He's like literally out. They swarm him. He's done. He's like walking back. Somebody picks up his stuff for him, a different cadre member, and he's like gone. And you lose guys in this thing. And then they're like, okay, unroll your socks, unroll your stuff. And you have a cadre member like deep dive in all of your equipment to make sure you're not hiding something that you like would be contraband, whether it's food or caffeine tablets or cocaine or nicotine. It doesn't matter. Anything like porn magazines, who knows what you're bringing. They're deep diving into it to make sure that you didn't have a false seam in your shirt where you added Adderall, or if people get crazy with this stuff, just like they do at Ranger School, because they know they're not going to be sleeping. Anything they can do to make an edge, they think they can get away with. So you'd be surprised what they find. They find some crazy Yahoo stuff. And if it's illegal, then they will UCMJ you, and you will get criminally punished for it. If it's something that you weren't supposed to have on the packing list, like nicotine or something like that, well, they're just going to say you're done. Integrity violation, you're out the door immediately. So it's pretty intense. Guys will have GPSs. Guys will get candy, things like that. I mean, it's a mess, and you would be surprised at how often it happens. You're going to have a few people in your class that'll get dropped from it. I've actually even heard that they drop people at the layout and don't tell them until 19-day non-selects. That's tough. That didn't happen in my class. I've never seen that, but I have a guy that's told me that that's happened. So then you'll basically do all the admin stuff. You'll get your roster numbers. This takes forever. Everything takes forever. We're talking 350 people plus, at least. Anywhere between 300 to 400 people in the selection class. So you'll get your roster number, you'll log in, you'll make sure that you're connected to Camp McCall. That you also get a CIF issue, so it's Central Issuing Facility. You get, they issue some stuff, a dog tracker, so that they can, or GPS that they track you. You don't get to track on it. Some flares for land navigation in case you get super lost. a few other items that's necessary. And then they show you where your room is. They show you where everything's going to be. They take you back outside and they select a class leader. It's typically like some E7 that's been in the Army, who gets fired really quick. They destroy him for whatever reason. And then somewhere around that time, somebody does something stupid. Like they tell you to hurry. And there's one guy that's still zipping up his bag and he's not done. And then they just crush your soul for like the next 2 hours. It happens very quick. They're like, all right, everybody, you got 10 seconds to unload your rucksacks and put everything on a poncho. And there's inevitably like a few guys who weren't moving fast or their zippers got caught. Who knows? It's not their fault. Something happens and they're just way behind. So he's like, oh, okay, guess we can't pay attention to detail. Get on your face. And hopefully it's raining and there's mud so they can drag you through it. And it just really sets the tone for the entire 19 days. And this is really day 0. This doesn't even start your 19 days. So everything's done. You've got all your administrative stuff done. You've got a class leader, which makes everything really easy because he's the one telling you what to do and they can just tell him. Then they start filtering you into these buildings where you're going to take these standardized tests. And these tests are going to be the D Lab for to see if you can learn a foreign language. It's going to be an IQ test. Maybe it's the Wonderlic. Sometimes they do that. And then it's going to be the Minnesota personality disorder test to make sure that you're not crazy. Which all of these tests, besides the personality disorder test, you can't really fail these. They just want to kind of know where you're at when they put this whole packet together at the end of selection. They want to know if something's on the line. Was his IQ really high? Was it average? Was it super low? Did he score really high on the D Lab? Maybe he's got that asset. Things like that. So it's not necessarily in your best favor, but it's not really in your worst. You're not going to fail if you get some low number on these tests. All of your meals these first 2 days are MREs. You don't even see the dining facility. You literally draw all these MREs and you just sit there and crush them cold as fast as possible while being yelled at. Very much like basic training, except it's a little bit more intense. And the people there are not just 18-year-old recruits. You've got guys that are in their 30s that have been in the Army for 12, 15 years, who are E7s, who are E6s, who are snipers, who are captains. And so the stakes are quite higher, and it's very clear just by looking at the people around you. You also write your preference list. So during those tests, you write out what you prefer in terms of if you pass and if you graduate. So if you pass selection, they want to know which MOS would you prefer, which language would you prefer, which location would you prefer, things like that. Because they do make a conscious decision and they try to connect you with what you want based on need. So for me, you can combine all of them. What's more important to you? Location, language, or job? For me, it was language, so I put Spanish first. And for other people, it may be location. They put North Carolina, or they put Fort Bragg, or they put third group. And for other people, it may be job. They put communications because they want to be a communications guy. So for me, it literally went like this. Spanish, which inevitably meant that I was going to 7th group, if you have a basic understanding of that. So you don't even have to put which group, you just put the language. So number 1, Spanish. Number 2, Delta, which is the medic. Number 3, Charlie, which is engineering. Number 4, Bravo, which is weapons. And then number 5, finally, was Echo, which is communications. So inevitably, fast forward a little bit, you don't learn about this till later. I was an Echo because they needed more Echoes and they didn't care. So, but I did get Spanish. So it's a give and take. I think most guys who filled that out got what they wanted, unless there was something really, really dire in need. And during my class, that was communications. They didn't have nearly enough communication guys graduating because max gain, which is the test during the Echo portion of MOS, crushed like 80% of the guys in one class. So they just really, really needed them. Fast forward a little bit. After SEER school, you're about 3/4 of the way done before you start your job training. They asked me if I wanted to be a Delta, which is the medic, which is what I put for like second on my wish list. But at that point I didn't, because the medic course is 9 months longer. And I was like, I could really see the end of the tunnel after SEER school, and I knew I'd be graduating. Honestly, within a year, I was like, no way I'm going to add another 9 months to this. Let's just send it with the communications. And I'm very happy that I did that. So you've taken all the tests, you've filled out your preference lists, you're eating your MREs, they've got you all outside. You're probably sitting on these rocks that you're going to sit on forever. And it's super bright. You can't wear sunglasses, obviously, which is a disaster because they want to see your eyes. And you're just getting destroyed because they're finding small things wrong. If they find one guy with contraband, you're all getting destroyed. they find anybody with anything, you're all getting destroyed. You've got what they consider canteens. You've got a weapon. You've got all these pieces of equipment. And now you're really, really ready to like start selection, to start the day one that you haven't really even started yet. This has all been testing and getting ready for the things. So you go back to your room. This is all still on Sunday. They jam this all in one day starting at like 4 a.m. So the night before, you slept well. Sunday's going pretty late. You're like, I think we're going to start tomorrow. But this whole process that we just discussed, takes forever. So that night, you're like, I think we're going to be good. I think we're going to be able to sleep pretty good. We'll see how tomorrow works out. And then like a shot in the dark at like 2:30 in the morning, you're up and it's game time. And there's horns and there's flashing lights. And it's like, get outside, get ready for this, this, and this. And selection is like officially started. And all of a sudden, there's so many Cadre members, I had no idea what was going on. But you're in a formation with literally 300 to 400 people. So it's very easy. My roster number was 154. It's very easy, you think, to just kind of blend in, just stand there. And so what inevitably takes hours every day is getting everyone out of bed and into formation, like we did in the middle of the dark. Everybody's got their headlamps on. We don't know what we're doing. Actually, we didn't have our headlamps on. We had no idea what we were doing. And our class leader had forgot to tell us all the instructions that the Cadre gave him. He fell asleep. So we got destroyed for that. And basically there's this big board, which is now electronic. But at the time, it was just a big whiteboard. Now it's an electronic screen. And you were like, hey, and they were like, hey, take all instructions from the board. And they'll write down throughout the day times to be places, what's coming up next, what you need, things like that. They don't just come out and tell you. And so somebody will see it as you're eating or as you're doing whatever and tell the class leader, hey, we got to be doing this, this, and this. We have to have this uniform and this equipment at this time. So the class leader was told all of this and just completely bombed on it and didn't tell anybody in space, fell asleep. So when we showed up to our formation, our very, very first formation to selection, I think a couple people just randomly knew what they were doing and they had headlamps. I didn't. Most people didn't. We were just in our little PT uniforms ready to go. We weren't even in uniforms. And you were supposed to be in uniforms and you were supposed to be in headlamps. So we got whatever we were about to do, we never did. I have no idea what it was. But we spent hours crawling through the sand, doing push-ups, sit-ups, grabbing these big logs and doing all kinds of dumb stuff with that. And then finally it was like, okay, it still wasn't even daylight. Finally it was like, okay, go get your headlamps, go change into your uniforms. You've got 10 minutes. And we were like forever away and everybody's exhausted. You know, who knows where your headlamp is in your bag right now, because it's not a situation where you have a locker that needs to stay connected or anything like that. So everybody runs and gets it and we're all super late. So inevitably it happens again. And we're like, okay, day one, let's see what selection has to hold. And finally, we get to a point, and then he's got to recount. You spend literally hours a day waiting on him to count all the people. And it's the job of the class leader, not the job of the cadre. So he's got to line all these people up who are like half asleep, panting, falling all over the place, and make sure that we have exactly the number we're supposed to have, so that there's not somebody in the bathroom dying or somebody completely lost that like hasn't slept. So it's actually really important, but it takes, easily hours every day. So we're all good to go. And he's like, okay, we've got our uniforms. During the admin portion, we sewn on all of our numbers, and our roster numbers are on each shoulder and each breast and on our hats, and then on the left shoulder and things like that. On our camelbacks, on our rucksacks, roster numbers like literally everywhere. And okay, 5-mile run. We're all in our uniform. We go for a 5-mile run. It's timed. If you're not under 40 minutes, you're out. Right then, that's like the very first gated thing we did. And 50 people failed it, regardless of if they were slow or they were tired from doing 1,000 burpees earlier, all through the sand, or if they were slow or if they just broke down in between all that. But it's super intense. Like everything is high speed, high intense. Some of these guys are talking through a megaphone. They've got air horns that they're blowing. They've got super bright lights that they're in everybody's faces, and you're just smoked the entire time. When you start this run, you're not fresh. It's like almost a joke. You're not fresh at all. So guys just didn't make it for whatever reason. And you think that all of your runs are going to be in PT uniforms, and they are after that. But that first one, it's not. Come to find out, it's not an actual 5-mile run. It's actually a little short because they tell you that you're only going to be in PTs when you run your 5-mile runs, and you are after this. But this run's actually like 4.5 miles. I found that out later. So the guys who failed like really were just the super out of shape ones or something like that. So they were done. And then they start with classes. So one thing you don't think about during selection is that you're going to be taking like daytime classes. So you're going to leave, you're going to go eat lunch, you're going to eat breakfast, get your life together, and then you've got to be back in the conference rooms at a certain time. You all got to line back up, count off, file into the conference rooms, all 300 and something of you. And then they go over, for example, the first day, land navigation, or how to tie a knot, or how to tie on your equipment, things like that. Some people think you need to come into selection without knowing what's going on. It's not really the case. They teach you how to do it. It's just that it's very condensed and very quick. So if you went through the prep course and you're an 18 X-ray, you've got a decent pulse of what land navigation is, and you understand kind of what's going on. If you've been in the infantry before, you've got a decent pulse of what land navigation is. If you've been to a few Army schools that do land navigation, then you get it. You know, a lot of schools do land navigation in the Army, like Sapper School, obviously a Ranger School. None of them are as intense as the Special Forces Selection STAR course, and subsequently the course you do again in a later phase in IUW. But if you've gone to these courses, you understand from a very macro level what land navigation is. You continue these courses. The first day it's land navigation in the morning, and then it was boot repair in the afternoon. So very much like the prep course, it's just random things that were going to help you out through this entire time. What they're doing is not only are they trying to help you, but they're also keeping you awake, and they're keeping you task saturated. Everything takes so long to do with 350 people that you don't get a lot done productively in a day, because it takes 2 hours to count everybody. And then it takes 40 minutes to line by line file into an auditorium when there's 360 people. And then it takes another 40 minutes just to get out. And then it takes another hour or so for everybody to get their food. So there's not a lot of time for other stuff throughout the day except for physical activities. So that's day one. Day one, you start with a run. After in the afternoon, you've kind of gone through the 2 classes that they're going to give you. They send you to dinner, which is an MRE underneath the picnic tables. Picnic tables are like your go-to for selection. There's typically not a SOPSI course and a selection going on at the same time. So all the selection guys are underneath the patio. And if you were there during a selection course, number one, you'd know it because there's so many more people. And number two, you'd see it because everyone would have that white tape with a roster number on it as opposed to anything else. It's very distinct who's in selection and who's not. And that's for the cadre so they can run it properly. End of the night, you kind of think everything's done. You go back to your bay. You're obviously like super exhausted. And they're like, okay, you've got an hour. Everybody needs to be showered and back in here in 1 hour, which is the train wreck. So everybody runs into the showers, which you need as much as possible. You get a shower in. It's actually enough time, but everybody rushes it even more than they should. And then it gets easier and easier each day because there's less people. By this time, you'll notice that there's a substantially smaller group. So many people have quit. So many people have failed the run. So many people dropped out whenever. So many people had injuries that they were either hiding or like small things that popped up. A couple of dudes in the group may have had a family issue pop up, but it's definitely less people after day one. And then it comes the evening, you've showered, you're back in your room, it's probably like 8 or 9 o'clock, and they basically say, okay, we've got more to come, do not fall asleep. And they just walk away. And they come back like hours later, literally hours later. All the lights are still on, everybody's still up, and there's nothing to do. You're all just like sitting around kind of staring at each other, just like drinking water. There's no entertainment. You've got books. That's about it. You're not writing letters because there's no external mail. And they just come by and they start picking people off that are asleep. They're like, hey, what's your name? What's your roster number? Write down that roster number. They walk by and they look for somebody else asleep. What's your roster number? Write that roster number down. And you have no idea what they're doing with that, but that's your roster number. And you're like terrified that they did that. And I fell asleep a few times. You can kind of make it happen. but I never got caught. But I had a ton of my friends that did. And you just don't know where that's going on day one. So if you can imagine 18 more days of misery, in day one, you were like, well, I could be done. I don't even know because I fell asleep for 5 seconds. So it's still unclear to me what exactly they do with those names or those numbers. And at the end, subsequently try to figure out what it is. But a lot of my guys that got caught sleeping 2-3 times passed. And a few guys that get caught sleeping once or even none failed. So it's just kind of like those tests that you take at the beginning. It's something that they take into account at the very end. If you're on the fence during team week, XYZ happens, they're not quite sure. Well, they look at your test scores. They look at how many times you fell asleep. They look at how many times you forgot to bring your headlamp to the formation. Random things. If they tell you to do something, you don't do it. Like you show up out of uniform, or if your rucksack's supposed to weigh 55 pounds and they weigh every single one and you're under, well, they write your number down. I had a good friend of mine. He weighed his rucksack on a scale that they give us to weigh ourselves. And he was like 56 and a half or something like that. But when he showed up for the Cadre, the weigh in, it was like 54.8. You're underweight. And silence. He just looked at the guy. I was standing right next to him. And he looked at him. He was like, hey, Sergeant, I just waited a minute ago and blah, blah, blah. He's like, shut up. Wrote down his roster number. And he was like, well, I guess you can hang around if you want. But you were underweight. And wrote down his number and was like, go over there. Go stand over there with your peers, get in line. And he made it very clear to him that, like, you're not going to make it now. Here's the beautiful thing. He did make it, and he got selected. These are the small mind games that they're going to start playing with you. You have no idea if coming underweight on a ruck is grounds for dismissal or not. You don't know. That's not a graded criteria. It's not a 5-mile run in under 40 minutes. He was so freaked out. He's like, well, Zack, this sucks. Literally like our first ruck. It wasn't like one of the really, really graded ones. It was just another ruck. You don't know which ones are graded and which ones aren't. He was super devastated. It was like catastrophic for him. It took him days to shake it. And in the middle of the night, as we're finishing up on the last night, he's like, dude, I still don't even know if I made it. Just kind of keep that in the back of your head. They're going to find ways to get under your skin and make you specifically think that it's all over for you. And to be honest, that who knows? That Cadre member may have not even wrote his number down. He may not care. It may go into some algorithm that they looked at the end. It doesn't matter, but you have to have a short-term memory, which is really hard to do. And my friend didn't do it. And you just got to be like, okay, well, whatever, we're moving forward. We also had some guys who got real scared of their weight during the ruck march. During a 12-mile ruck, they were caught adding rocks on the road, and they were picking them up and putting them in each other's rucksacks because they weigh it before you leave and they weigh it when you come back. And so they were like, we caught you putting rocks in your rucksacks, you're out. Why were you doing that? And it was very clear that the Cadre members thought that that was an integrity violation because they probably went down a couple miles, dropped some weight, and now they're trying to add it at the end. And there's no way to distinguish if you were or weren't doing that. And it's very clear that you cannot add weight during the ruck. They make that apparent up front. So those guys were dropped right then. There was no drama with it. We caught you. They hide in the woods, especially at night with nods, and they watch what you do and you have no idea. Just like randomly throughout all of your activities, there's some guy in the woods watching you with the binoculars or with night vision goggles underneath a camo blanket, things like this, and you have no idea. And they caught these dudes picking up rocks and putting in each other's rucksacks, and they were out. Good dudes, in my opinion. I don't know what they were doing, but they were done. That's really all that matters. They never came back. I'm going to pause right there. I think we're at a good stopping point. We're really through the first section of the 19-day journey through selection itself. And then when we follow up on the third episode, I'm going to dive into the rest of selection and then also the Warrior Leadership course. And we'll actually start into the Q course journey itself after selection's over and after you've gotten picked up. If you've enjoyed this podcast, reach out to me. Tell me specifically which parts you liked, what parts you didn't like. I appreciate all of you guys being here and listening in to the podcast today. And once again, next week we'll drop episode 3 of 6 of the Operators Association Special Forces Journey. Thank you for listening.